At 6, all frontline NHS staff in England must be fully vaccinated against coronavirus by spring. Around 100,000 NHS workers still haven't had the jab. They'll need to have had both doses by April the 1st.
We must avoid preventable harm and protect patients in the NHS, protect colleagues in the NHS, and, of course, protect the NHS itself.
It's unethical to force anyone to have a medical procedure. And if I've decided for various reasons to not have this medical procedure, it shouldn't be up to the government to force me to, or to say I'm going to lose my job.
We'll be asking what will happen to NHS frontline workers who refuse, also tonight. Labour calls on the Prime Minister to launch an investigation into the Tory MP Sir Geoffrey Cox, who was paid almost £900,000 for work outside Parliament, including a stint in the Caribbean. Police name a 10-year-old boy who was killed by a dog at a friend's house yesterday. Trying to reach the EU through Poland, thousands of migrants are trapped on the border in Belarus. Poland's Prime Minister accuses Russia of being behind it. An MBE for England footballer Marcus Rashford. He dedicates it to his mum.
Coming up on Sports Day on the BBC News channel, later in the hour, we're going to get the latest from Abu Dhabi ahead of England's T20 World Cup semi-final against New Zealand.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Health Secretary Sajid Javid says all frontline NHS staff in England will have to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 by next spring unless they're medically exempt. It's estimated that just over 100,000 NHS workers in England are currently unvaccinated. Health unions say people should be encouraged rather than forced to have jabs. There are no plans yet for a similar move for NHS staff in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh has more.
Do you want to roll up your sleeve for me?
No jab, no job. That appears to be the stark reality facing NHS workers in England. Those with face-to-face contact with patients have until the 1st of April to have 2 doses of vaccine.
Sajid Javid.
The Health Secretary said the move would protect both patients and staff from infection.
No one in the NHS or care that is currently unvaccinated should be scapegoated, singled out or shamed. That would be totally unacceptable. This is about supporting them to make a positive choice, to protect vulnerable people, to protect their colleagues, and of course, to protect themselves.
The NHS staff we spoke to in London were broadly in favour.
I'm all for it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If people want to work here, then they should be prepared to have whatever vaccinations they need.
I think so. Everyone needs to have the vaccine.
But this trainee GP says she's recently had COVID and believes she's now protected and so doesn't want to be vaccinated.
It's unethical to force anyone to have a medical procedure. And if I've decided for various reasons to not have this medical procedure, it shouldn't be up to the government to force me to, or to say I'm going to lose my job.
In England, 90% of NHS staff have had 2 doses of COVID vaccine, but 103,000 are completely unvaccinated. Among care home workers in England, 88,000 were unvaccinated just a few months ago. That's now down to 32,000, but the deadline for them to be fully jabbed is this Thursday. There are over 90,000 job vacancies in the NHS, and employers are concerned that could rise even further.
If we lose significant numbers of staff as a result of mandatory vaccination, then that's going to put very, very significant pressure on the NHS. So what we're saying to the government today is, yeah, absolutely see the logic of why you would want to do this, but please help us manage the risk of losing NHS staff.
Several European countries already have compulsory vaccination for health workers. It prompted protests in France, but the government there says take-up among staff soared from just 60% in July to 99% now. Ministers here will be hoping for a big boost in immunisation rates, but there's a risk that this may alienate some staff who choose to leave the NHS rather than being taken off the wards and redeployed.
Well, Fergus joins me. Now, what happens if staff refuse?
It's unclear, Sophie. To be deployed from the 1st of April next year in face-to-face contact with patients, if you're a nurse, a doctor, a porter, a receptionist, you will need to be double jabbed in England. Now, it's unclear what will happen to people who dig in and say, I'm not going to have the jab. If you're a nurse and you decide, I don't want to be vaccinated, the healthcare union Unison said they would expect them initially to be redeployed into perhaps a call centre or a clerical role, but that could have a big impact on the wards. Dismissal would be seen as a last resort, but really we need the detail. There's still a lot of detail of this announcement we don't have, but no other parts of the UK yet have decided to go with this move. Northern Ireland is going to have a consultation on it.
Fergus, thank you. The government's latest coronavirus figures for the UK show there were more than 33,117 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means on average there were 34,148 new cases reported per day in the last week. 262 deaths were recorded. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average, in the past week, 166 related deaths were recorded every day. And more than 10.5 million people have received their booster jab. Labour has called on the Prime Minister to launch an investigation into a Conservative MP who earned almost £900,000 through jobs outside Parliament. Sir Geoffrey Cox racked up the wage bill as a lawyer, including a spell working in the Caribbean to advise on a corruption inquiry. Sir Geoffrey has not broken any rules, but Downing Street said MPs who don't serve their constituents and make themselves visible to the public are not doing the job. Our political correspondent Ben Wright reports.
For some MPs, one job is not enough. This Devon constituency is represented in Parliament by the Conservative MP Sir Geoffrey Cox. His majority is huge, and so are the fees he charges as a lawyer for work that takes him a long way from his voters.
The purpose of elected office is to serve the public. It is not to enrich the office holder.
Here is Sir Geoffrey in June, representing the British Virgin Islands, which is facing an inquiry into the way it's governed. The Daily Mail reported that the MP was also there for several weeks in April, voting remotely in the Commons from the Caribbean island. Many MPs did use proxy voting during the pandemic, but ministers weren't rushing to Sir Geoffrey's defence today.
Ultimately, it's one for his voters to decide. I don't think it's for me to start making or prejudicing second-guessing the judgments that they make. What's crucially important is transparency around any outside interests.
What are you playing at?
Yeah. The former Attorney General was a booming presence during the Brexit debates.
You are not children in the playground.
But he has stayed silent today. Over the last year, Sir Geoffrey earned almost £900,000 for his legal work, all of which has been properly declared and is allowed within the rules. But Labour says Boris Johnson should investigate.
We're seeing more and more instances of behaviour that most people would view as beyond the pale, and a Conservative Prime Minister who is refusing to take action.
Almost a week after Number 10's botched attempt to change the way MPs' behaviour is investigated, the fallout continues to make grim reading for the government. The saga has put a spotlight on sleaze, standards and now second jobs. MPs earn £82,000 a year, but some earn extra income as business consultants, doctors, lawyers and more. Defenders of second jobs say it's a way of broadening Parliament's expertise and enticing higher earners into politics, but others argue that the basic salary is more than enough. But aside from the cash, in Devon there's the question of their MP's commitment to the job.
Absolutely outrageous. We need Geoffrey back here in Devon. We need him here now.
It doesn't bother me if he has a second job, so long as he does his job well.
We've gone through all the struggle and to see him not be here for us, it's quite hard. Yeah, it's quite shocking, really.
Number 10 does not want an outright ban on second jobs, but it has stoked this focus on probity in politics and the work done by our MPs. Ben Wright, BBC News.
An international group of scientists has warned that the world is still heading for dangerously high global temperatures by the end of the century, even if countries stick to their promises made in Glasgow at the COP26 summit. The aim is to keep global temperature rises below 1.5 degrees, but researchers say it will be impossible to reach that goal based on the pledges that have been made so far. From Glasgow, here's our science editor, David Shukman.
This is what the talks are all about, keeping the planet safe to live on. And when astronaut Tim Peake filmed this view, he was really struck by what we keep adding to the air and what that's doing to the climate. So he's come to the conference in Glasgow to spell out the dangers.
Every sunrise and sunset, we see Earth's atmosphere just 16 kilometres thick, and you realise that's it. That's what protects all life down here on the planet. And if we put things into that atmosphere, if for example, wildfires, you see them covering entire continents, and the smoke disperses, and that's when you really appreciate that it doesn't have anywhere else to go. We're all on this one planet together.
But the challenge here at this massive gathering is to get delegates from nearly 200 countries to agree on what to do, to try to slow down the pace of climate change. So after 10 days of talking, what's actually been achieved in terms of heading off the risk of the planet getting hotter? Well, just before the conference started, we were on course for an increase of 2.7 degrees Celsius, a really dangerous prospect. Now, if everyone keeps the promises they've made in recent days, that's come down to something like 1.8 degrees Celsius. But it all depends on everyone keeping their word, and even if they do, that's still above the target of 1.5 degrees. So the problem is far from sorted.
We don't have much time. We want to stay under 1.5, and we're already seeing the climate changing. So now we need to invest. Now we need to protect. We cannot kick this can down the road. It is not something we can do in 2030, 2050. We need to do it in 2021 and 2022.
New extremes of temperature are proving hazardous in many regions already. And a study by Met Office scientists warns that 1 billion people could be affected by a combination of rising heat and humidity. Working outdoors could become almost impossible. So for some, climate change is about survival, including the tiny island nations of the Pacific.
The realities of climate change.
This government minister in Tuvalu recorded a video appeal for help.
We cannot wait for speeches when the sea is rising around us all the time.
He's banking on the next few days of negotiations, coming up with a way to make the world less threatening. David Shukman, BBC News in Glasgow.
The mother of a 10-year-old boy who was killed by a dog has paid tribute to her beautiful and sweet son. Jack Liss died yesterday afternoon while visiting a friend's house in Caerphilly. The dog has since been destroyed. Thomas Morgan reports.
A heartbreaking note, a close-knit community torn apart. After hearing that 10-year-old Jack Liss was killed by a dog on Monday. In a Facebook post, his mother Emma Whitfield wrote today, "Our beautiful boy was taken tragically yesterday," adding, "We love you so much, our sweet, sweet boy." It's understood Jack was visiting a friend who didn't sustain any injuries after school last night when the attack took place. And neighbours here have described the events as both tragic and upsetting.
When I was out there, I felt like really shaky and I was scared because I seen the body over there. They put the white sheet over him. We heard the gunshots when they shot the dog. I just started shaking and I was getting really scared.
The kids, they were screaming, they were crying, they were just, well, you can imagine, they were hysterical, absolutely hysterical.
Police have confirmed that Jack and his friend were alone with no adult present when the attack took place yesterday afternoon, and that the dog itself was owned by those that lived in this property.
There are prohibited dogs that are not allowed within the UK. It's an absolute offence to possess them, and should that be one of those dogs, then we will be taking action. Obviously, there are other offences potentially from a willful or a neglectful act that could have been committed.
24 hours on, and there has been a police presence all day as they continue their investigation into what led to the death of young Jack Liss. Thomas Morgan, BBC News, Caerphilly.
At least 2,000 migrants are now gathered in freezing temperatures in Belarus on the border with Poland as they try to reach the European Union. The Polish Prime Minister has accused Russia of masterminding the unprecedented wave of migrants, many of them from the Middle East, who are crossing through Belarus to the border, saying it's an attempt to destabilise the EU. But both Moscow and Belarus deny orchestrating the crisis. From the border, here's our Europe correspondent, Nick Beake.
On the edge of the European Union, a new desperate migrant camp has just emerged. On the left, those who have come to Belarus and now made their way to the border with Poland. On the right, barbed wire and lines of troops stopping them from crossing. Throughout the day, we watched dozens of reinforcements race to this area. Poland already has a force of 12,000 guarding its eastern border and is keeping aid agencies and journalists away. But we managed to make contact with some of those now trapped in the freezing forest.
We feel so bad because nobody helped us in here and we're so hungry, we're thirsty, no water, no food, no help.
Like most here, Aziz is Kurdish and from Iraq.
That's all. Poland police, he don't let us get inside. A big tension in here and so many family and little children right here.
Poland has vowed to defend its and the EU's borders and accuses Belarus of using civilians as weapons in retaliation for sanctions.
We know that this is a fully planned operation which aims to disrupt the sovereignty of our country. That's absolutely clear to us. We know for sure that there is a search for weak spots happening on the border.
But getting any nearer to where this crisis has erupted is not possible, as we soon found out.
Can we go further in? Are we allowed to go further towards the border today?
No.
Poland, like neighbouring Lithuania, has declared a state of emergency.
Well, this is as close as we can get to the Poland-Belarus border today, because beyond this checkpoint lies a part of the European Union that the Polish authorities do not want us to see for ourselves. They are dealing with this growing migrant crisis out of sight and on their own terms.
The European Union is backing Poland and calling for tighter sanctions on Belarus, which continues to deny it's creating this chaos. Tonight, its president said he didn't want an armed confrontation, but claimed any escalation would bring in its ally, Russia.
It will immediately involve Russia in this whirlpool, and they are the largest nuclear power.
The United Nations is calling for calm, but the politics are bitter and the situation on the ground increasingly desperate. Nick Beake, BBC News, on the Polish-Belarusian border.
The time is almost 6:20. Our top story this evening. The Health Secretary says all frontline NHS staff in England must be fully vaccinated against coronavirus by April the 1st. And after 54 hours trapped underground, the rescued caver is said to be in good spirits despite multiple injuries.
Coming up on Sports Day in the next 15 minutes on the BBC News channel, Emma Raducanu is seeing out her incredible season in Austria. We'll have the latest from her match in Linz and news of her search for a full-time coach.
Climate change is affecting the ocean's ability to absorb our carbon emissions, according to scientists who've sent robots down to the sea floor up to 3.5 miles below the surface. The latest discovery by the UK-led iAtlantic project has revealed that if global temperatures increase to levels predicted, the ocean might no longer be able to provide what is currently Earth's largest long-term carbon store. Our science correspondent Victoria Gill has more.
Diving to ocean depths of up to 3.5 miles. This is the abyssal zone, where robotic explorers are taking samples from places no one has ever touched. A third of the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere dissolves in the surface of the ocean. When tiny marine plants and animals feed on that carbon, it becomes part of a cycle that's made the deep ocean and its muddy floor Earth's largest carbon store. In an aquarium like this, you get a snippet of the life in the shallower parts of the ocean. But in the deep ocean floor, there are single-celled organisms that we can't even see, and it's those that are responsible for locking away carbon in the deep. In experiments carried out in the equatorial Atlantic, about 500 miles off the coast of West Africa, researchers brought tubes of seafloor mud into their ocean laboratories to test what happens to the carbon that's contained in these sediments as the ocean temperature rises.
So we have to understand how this part of our planet will work in the future. In this abyssal ocean that covers 60% of our planet, we're finding that under higher temperatures, we can store less carbon in these places. The ecosystems are turning the carbon over faster. They're running at a higher temperature more quickly, and they're going to release more carbon in the future, and that's really worrying.
We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about life at these extreme depths. And researchers say this latest finding is just a glimpse of how our greenhouse gas emissions are transforming this huge and misunderstood habitat. Working out how the deep ocean will be affected by climate change and how it could help us to solve this very human-made problem will require much deeper exploration. Victoria Gill, BBC News.
Rolls-Royce has secured over £400 million from the UK government and a consortium of private investors to develop a new range of small nuclear reactors, which ministers hope will eventually create up to 40,000 new jobs in the UK. But critics say the focus should be on renewable technology that exists now, not on projects that will take a decade to deliver. Our business editor, Simon Jack, reports.
Building new nuclear reactors is an enormous undertaking. Hinkley Point in Somerset is Europe's largest construction project. It will provide enough energy for 6 million homes when it's finished in 2025, a decade and over £20 billion from start to finish. For a tenth of that price, you could have one of these, the size of a football stadium, tiny by nuclear standards, but capable of powering 1 million homes. Always on, it's the perfect complement to intermittent wind power, according to Rolls-Royce, who secured the cash to develop them.
Because of the sheer amount of electricity, zero carbon electricity required, we're absolutely convinced that nuclear needs to be part of that jigsaw, and it needs to be a flexible and economic solution like the small reactors, which will provide a complement to those renewables.
The government sees the project as creating jobs and world-leading technology that could be exported around a world in need of low-carbon energy.
There'll be a whole range of jobs relating to not only building the small modular reactors, but in time running them, nuclear skills. I'll be meeting apprentices a bit later today, young people in their late teens who really see a future, a long-term future in a well-paid industry.
This is where the UK currently gets its energy. As you can see, nuclear there is 16%, behind wind and gas, but still pretty substantial. But that share is expected to fall as all the UK's current operating nuclear plants are due to be decommissioned by 2035. There's only one new one under construction at Hinkley Point in Somerset, with another one at Sizewell being considered right now. Skeptics agree the need to decarbonise is urgent, but say renewable energy is available here and now and is already cheaper than nuclear, which has a history of overpromising and under-delivering.
We don't know that this design, which will take 3 years to produce, will work. We don't know if it'll be approved by the nuclear regulators. We don't know what the electricity from it will cost and whether that can compete with electricity from renewables.
The $400 million announced today is only enough to get a design approved. The construction and location of these baby reactors is not yet decided. But one thing most energy experts agree on, big or small, it will be hard to get to net zero without nuclear. Simon Jack, BBC News.
A man rescued from a cave in the Brecon Beacons after more than 2 days underground is said to be in good spirits despite multiple injuries. Around 300 people were involved in the operation to bring him out on a stretcher from what is one of the deepest cave systems in the UK. It took them more than 54 hours. Hal Griffith reports.
Pulling together to help one of their own. The rescuers' own pictures tell a story of teamwork in the most challenging conditions. Today, as they cleared up, a chance to realise just what they'd achieved.
We look after each other. We're an extended family, effectively.
you know, we don't know each other, all of us. We are like a big family. But if one of us is in trouble, no matter where it is, we'll go and help.
The man they rescued was an experienced caver in his 40s. When he fell, he broke bones in his leg and jaw. There was no way he could make his own way out. It's hard to fathom on the surface, but beneath us here are 37 miles worth of tunnels crisscrossing between the caves. There are only 3 ways in and out, and this tiny metal door is one of them, an entrance to a hidden world. It was here at Cwmdwr that the caver entered as part of a group on Saturday. They'd travelled around 500 metres when the caver fell from a 9-metre ledge as it gave way. The route back was too narrow, and so teams of rescuers had to carry him 3 kilometres towards the top entrance. Manoeuvring a stretcher meant it took 10 times longer than usual, clocking up 54 hours, the longest carry in UK caving history.
If you can imagine, lots of passages, some big, some small chambers, but they're all kind of stacked on top of each other, overlapping each other.
Tom is one of the 300 volunteers who put in a shift. He says one of the biggest challenges was taking a floating stretcher through a long, perilous section of water.
It has lots of little cascades, waterfalls, and also very deep potholes full of water. You'd be out of your depth if you went into them, potentially have to swim across.
And you had to get a stretcher over all of that.
Yeah, that's right.
It's rare for cavers to be in the limelight. For these volunteers, the only reward is knowing others would come to their aid. Hywel Griffith, BBC News, at the Fun on the Cave.
The Manchester United and England player Marcus Rashford has been awarded an MBE for his campaign to support vulnerable children. The footballer has been recognised for his work to support pupils on free school meals during the pandemic. The 24-year-old dedicated his MBE to his mother. From Windsor, Dan Johnson reports.
From Wythenshawe to Windsor Castle, football pitch to Palace Lawn, changing government policy along the way. His influence has grown, and so's his recognition.
Things like this help push what I'm actually doing in the right direction, because it makes people more aware of what I'm doing. You know, it puts you on a pedestal, and people start to listen to people when you're on a pedestal.
Mr. Marcus Rashford, for services to vulnerable children in the United Kingdom during COVID-19.
The Duke of Cambridge, president of the Football Association, said he was pleased to be back hosting an investiture ceremony in person for the first time since the pandemic. So what did they talk about? What else?
We were speaking about football, actually. We were just speaking about the Euros and how good it was to see everyone come together and support the team.
During the pandemic, he campaigned to extend free school meal vouchers for poorer children through the summer holidays, but he's still highlighting issues like poverty and homelessness.
We're not nowhere near where we want to be, where I feel that the kids deserve to be. But, you know, we've just got to keep sticking at it and keep going.
He's a young man, just 24, who's achieved a huge amount already and promises there's more to come, on the pitch and off it. Dan Johnson, BBC News at Windsor Castle.
Time now for a look at the weather with Helen Willits. Hello.
Hi Sophie. A little bit of sunshine in Windsor today, but it has on the whole been a rather cloudy affair. For England and Wales, we've got this mild southwesterly wind with us at the moment, and that's just piling in cloud off the Atlantic. To the north of that, as you'll see, we've got some clearer skies. We've had some sunshine for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but there is another lump on that weather front looming large to the west of us, and so it will hang around, as I'll show you, through the rest of this evening, overnight and into tomorrow as well. Just pepping the rain up at times, but not a great deal, just an awful lot of cloud. Light winds as well mean that some of that cloud is sitting on the coast and the hills and giving quite foggy conditions. And overnight, the showers inland across Scotland and Northern Ireland tend to fade away, and Northern England, so a tad chilly here, touch of frost. But once again, where we have the leaden skies further south and further outbreaks of light rain or drizzle, mild. 11 or 12 is what we'd normally see during the day at this time of year. So it does mean that it'll be rather grey, murky, misty across much of England and Wales to start the day. Brighter skies, though, favoured for Scotland and Northern Ireland because of the touch of frost here. The sunshine continues, a few showers pestering northern and western areas. The far north quite breezy. Temperatures where they should be, really, across Scotland, Northern Ireland. The sunshine coming through for Northern England, eventually North Wales, but quite a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain, light rain further south, so nuisance value for most. And still around tomorrow night in the south, another weather front starts to move into the north tomorrow night as well. So with more cloud around, not quite as chilly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. But again, very weak weather fronts because we're building them into high pressure through the day on Thursday. So mist and fog again in the morning with a light wind regime. A lot of dry but rather cloudy weather, but you really can't ignore what's happening just behind me here. And that has a big question mark over it for the end of the week. It looks like we've got a deep area of low pressure moving its way in. The good news is it should have moved out of the way for the weekend, but the bad news is we're just uncertain as to exactly how far south the heavier rain and the strong winds will come. So we will be keeping a close eye on that as we go through the rest of the week. Sophie.
Helen, thank you. A reminder now of our main story this evening. The Health Secretary says all frontline NHS staff in England must be fully vaccinated against coronavirus by April the 1st. Around 100,000 workers haven't had the jab so far.
We must avoid preventable harm and protect patients in the NHS, protect colleagues in the NHS, and, of course, protect the NHS itself.
That's all from the BBC News at 6. It's goodbye from me on BBC One. We join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.